Dining with Confucius. What can you actually eat? Everything on this table. You know it all. Chili peppers, Sichuan peppercorns, tallow, cilantro. Here's a fact. 2,000 years ago, none of this existed. Not a single thing. Sit down at Confucius's table. First course, the staple. Don't expect rice. Let's talk about rice first. Rice actually has a longer history than millet. 10,000 years ago, ancestors in the Yangtze River region of southern China were already growing it. But that was a southern thing. North of the Qinling-Huaihe line, rice simply couldn't grow. In the north, rice was a luxury, something only the nobility occasionally glimpsed. Confucius lived in Shandong, solidly northern. He probably tasted rice just a handful of times in his life. The common people ate millet, two kinds, millet and broomcorn millet. These two grains fed northern China for nearly 10,000 years. You could call them the founding fathers of Chinese civilization. Without millet, there's no Yellow River farming culture. Without that, there's nothing that comes after. Fresh-hulled millet is golden. Beautiful, actually. Tastes fine, too. Same with rice. White and clean once hulled. But the hulling process back then? Manual pounding. You put the grain in a stone mortar. A strong man pounds it with a wooden pestle. Back-breaking work. One batch leaves you drenched in sweat. If you don't pound thoroughly enough, the husks and bran don't come off clean. The golden color turns dark and gray. Proper white rice and white flour? That came much later. Here's the thing that really matters. There were no mills. Stone mills didn't become widespread until the Qin Han period. In Confucius's time, they simply didn't exist. What does that mean? Wheat couldn't be ground into flour. It had to be cooked whole. Noodles, steamed buns, dumplings, none of it existed. That gap wouldn't be filled until stone mills finally spread centuries later. Speaking of wheat, wheat isn't native to China. Its homeland is in West Asia, what is today Iraq and Syria. It made its way east into China roughly 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. When it arrived, there were no mills. No one knew how to grind it into flour, so people just cooked it whole. They called it wheat rice. You're picturing something right now, aren't you? Yes, exactly that. First bite. Can't chew through it. 5 seconds in. Still chewing. 10 seconds in. You start to question your teeth. This is what Confucius ate every day. And yet he insisted, eat only the finest. Translation: whenever possible, make the food more refined. That's not fussiness, that's post-traumatic stress. Now, let's look at the vegetables. Chili peppers arrived from the Americas in the Ming Dynasty, not there. Tomatoes didn't become common until the Qing Dynasty, not there. Potatoes, sweet potatoes, peanuts, all introduced from the Americas in the Ming-Qing period, not there. Eggplant, cucumber, didn't arrive until after the Han Dynasty, not there. Napa cabbage came later. Same story. Cross them all off. Every single vegetable you eat today, most of them hadn't even arrived yet. So what was actually on the table? Ancient China had 5 vegetables. Just 5. They called them the 5 vegetables. Kui, huo, xie, kong, ju. Kui, winter mallow. Once called the king of all vegetables. In the south today, it's known as winter greens. People in Sichuan and Hunan still eat it. Most northerners have never seen it. Slimy texture, a bit like wood ear fungus. When Napa cabbage came along, longer shelf life, higher yield, winter mallow lost its crown. These days, it's making a comeback, though. Nutritionists have rediscovered it. Health food circles are buzzing. The fallen king is rising again. Kong, green onion. You know this one. But back then, it wasn't a seasoning. It was a proper vegetable. You ate the whole stalk raw, or dipped it in salt. Want to dip it in sauce? There was sauce, but it was called hai, meat paste. Nobles only. Commoners couldn't touch it. Interesting side note. Shandong people's love of eating raw green onion has roots going back over 2,000 years. Jiu, Chinese chives. You know this one too. But in the spring and autumn period, chives were sacred, reserved for ritual offerings. The Book of Songs says it clearly. In the first month, sacrifice the lamb with chives. Something that sat on the altar didn't necessarily reach the common table. After the Han Dynasty, chives finally became everyday food. They have one very practical quality. Cut them, they grow back. Cut again, grow again, season after season. A lifeline for the poor. There's another vegetable on the list. It's called huo. Most people have never heard the word. Huo is soybean leaves. Soybeans back then were called shu, one of the most important crops of the era. The beans made rice, the leaves made soup. One plant eaten from top to bottom. The soup was called huogang. The Strategies of the Warring States records what ordinary people in the state of Han ate. The original text, most of what the people ate was bean rice and huo soup. In plain language, soybean rice and soybean leaf soup, every single day. Imagine the taste of that soup. Soybean leaves are slightly bitter, coarse fiber, get stuck in your teeth. Nothing like the refined vegetable soups of today. It was genuinely awful. Confucius finished it, set down his bowl, straightened his robe, and went back to teaching propriety. One more vegetable in the five, Z. Northerners call it wild garlic or small root garlic, the kind you dig up from open fields in spring. Hollow tubular leaves, small white bulb at the base. Both the bulb and the leaves are edible. The flavor is intensely pungent. In a world with no seasonings whatsoever, it was the one thing that gave that bowl of wheat porridge any reason to exist. In the South, a domesticated version was developed called jiao tu, larger bulb, used specifically for pickling. In the North, people still mostly forage the wild version. Nobody really cultivates it. These days, urban people can barely find it. Less open land means less of the plant. It's become a rare thing. Here's the irony. In American lawns, roadsides, and forests, this exact family of wild onion and garlic grows everywhere. Americans pull it out as an invasive weed. Chinese people dig it up like treasure. This is the table of ancient China. Not one vegetable you recognize. Not one staple food you're used to. No stone mill, no flour, no wok. And that's not even the worst of it. Next, the taste. Brace yourself. First, the staple. Here comes the millet rice. The millet porridge you drink today, smooth, soft, gentle on the stomach. That is the product of modern precision milling. Millet rice in the spring and autumn period was nothing like that. When you whole grain by pounding, the bran never comes off completely. What you cook is gritty, full of husks. Every bite feels like chewing sand. Archaeologists have dug up a large number of skulls from this period. They all share one feature: severely worn molars. Not because these people liked chewing hard things, because every day their food contained tiny bits of grit and husk, year after year. The teeth just ground away. Confucius lived to 73. By that age, he probably had very few teeth left. That is why he was so obsessed with eating only the finest. It was not about taste. It was personal experience. Now try the wheat rice. Millet rice is actually the better option. Wheat rice is the real punishment. Whole wheat kernels cooked directly in water. That thick outer bran layer, tough and leathery. No matter how long you cook it, it never softens. In ancient texts, there is a phrase, wheat rice and bean soup. It was the standard description for a poor household's meal. The nobility looked down on wheat rice. They called it food for peasants and field workers. Archaeologists analyzed bones from the spring and autumn and warring states periods. People of lower status and sacrificial slaves, their carbon isotope data showed they consumed large amounts of wheat. The nobility mainly ate millet. In other words, in Confucius's time, eating wheat rice was itself a marker of low status. Confucius came from a modest background. He ate wheat rice as a young man. That probably explains why he was so particular about food, so insistent, so relentless about it. In the South, if you served wheat rice at a dinner party, that was not hospitality. That was an insult. Wheat carried the label of inferior grain for nearly 1,000 years. It only shed that label after stone mills became widespread. Then there is bean rice. You might be picturing fresh edamame or green peas, soft, slightly sweet, served alongside real rice. That is not what this is. Bean rice in this era meant dried soybeans cooked whole. Yellow soybeans, dried ones, thrown straight into the pot. The result? Hard, starchy, almost no flavor. And there is a very practical problem. Soybeans contain large amounts of oligosaccharides. The human body cannot digest them. After eating, well, you know. Confucius insisted on no talking at the table. Why? Propriety is one reason, but there are two more practical reasons. The food was full of grit, and talking risked cracking a tooth. And with all those beans in the meal, silence was the last remaining dignity for everyone present. Meal finished. Want something sweet? There is nothing. Sugar was extremely scarce in the spring and autumn period. Cane sugar didn't arrive from India until after the Han Dynasty. Refined white sugar didn't exist until the Tang Dynasty. Sweet flavor came from two things only, malt sugar and honey. Malt sugar, called yi, was limited in supply. Expensive. Honey was wild. You had to climb trees to find it. Even more expensive. And the sweetness itself was different from white sugar. Not that clean, sharp sweetness you know today. It was a subtle sweetness, carrying the fermented smell of grain. But for someone who had never tasted sugar in their life, that flavor was not a snack. It was a miracle. In the Analects, Confucius says he once heard beautiful music and for 3 months did not notice the taste of meat. In modern terms, so moved he forgot to eat. But in that era, meat was not something people had every day. The piece of meat he was willing to give up was already the most prized pleasure an ordinary person could imagine. This is the table Confucius faced every day. Gritty millet rice, unchewable wheat rice, bitter bean leaf soup, no sweetness, no oil, not a single vegetable you would recognize today. His response was not to settle. It was to take whatever was available and push it to its limit. Meat cut into perfect squares. Ingredients as fresh as possible. No talking during meals. Sit straight. Stay present. Eat only the finest. Cut only the finest. Those 8 words were not the boast of a wealthy man. They were the last act of dignity from someone living inside profound scarcity. Not tasting right is still not the worst of it. You may not have noticed, but there is something completely absent from this entire table. Not meat, not rice, not seasoning, oil. Next video, what a world without cooking oil looks like. That is the most brutal truth about this meal. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe. This channel talking about the stories